In July 2011, authorities investigated the suspicious death of a woman who was found in the backyard of the historic Spreckles mansion in Coronado. The investigation came 2 days after the owner's 6-year-old son was gravely injured in a reported fall at the house. In a new book, New York Times best-selling author and Pulitzer-nominated reporter Caitlin Rother addresses the multitude of unanswered questions surrounding the deaths. Rother spoke to the Coronado Library.
I have brought forth new information which talk about more theories, more evidence, more outside experts analyzing the sheriff's evidence to, maybe hopefully another agency might want to reopen the investigation and try to answer all these, very, very many unanswered questions. Because as the judge even said, the sheriff's investigation leaves as many questions unanswered as it answers. When I first started, following this case immediately, because I was intrigued just like everybody else, and everybody immediately thought, why would a woman do that to herself? Everybody had all these crazy conspiracy theories and all kinds of accusations against the, people who were later named in the civil lawsuit and then dropped, and, the boyfriend and this and that. And so I kind of just stood back. I was following the sheriff's department's investigation. And then when they were ready to announce it, I tried to go to the news conference and I wasn't allowed in because I did not have a press pass. I used to have a press pass because I worked at the Union Tribune, but since I am no longer a member of the working media, even though I write books that are way more in-depth than any of the news programs, no offense to them, but I do long-form journalism. I wasn't allowed in. So right away, I thought, so the sheriff's department's trying to control the narrative. So that was the first group in this case that has controlled the narrative. Now, pretty much every main party and character in this case has their own narrative and has tried to control the narrative and has their own agenda. So I am pretty much the only person who has been following this case who doesn't have an agenda. And I don't mean news reporters have an agenda. I mean the parties in the case. What I find with many of the narrative nonfiction books that I write, and what that means is it literally reads like fiction, but none of it is made up. So I have to do a tremendous amount of research in order for it to read like a novel because it has to be authoritative. I have to know what I'm talking about. So I'm basically crafting scenes just like I do in a novel. And this case is stranger than fiction. I mean, you could not make this up, honestly, because women don't commit suicide by hanging outside, naked, bound, and gagged. It is a completely unusual and extremely rare situation. In fact, nobody who testified had ever heard of anything like this in their experience. These are detectives, these are medical examiner, pathologists. Cyril Wecht, he's a forensic pathologist. He was 88 at the time, and he'd never seen anything like it, and he thought it was a murder. Part of what is different about this book than all my other books, I have chapters in some of my other true crime books where I sit down with the defendant or the person who's been convicted of murder. I can do that in the jail. I sometimes go to prison. I've been to death row and interviewed somebody who was already convicted and sentenced. In this case, was not a criminal case. All we have is somebody who's being accused in civil court where the burden of proof is much lower. So this is different because I put myself into this book and I actually am a character in this book. Now, I'm not a major character, and I'm in the book more in the second half and the last portions of the book. But my husband committed suicide by hanging in 1999, and I couldn't even say that out loud for years. It was very difficult for me to even talk about. But it's been 21, 22 years now, and I wrote my own little memoir about it. And I did that only after I watched this trial. It took me 19 years to be able to really be able to talk about it and put it on paper. But that gave me some tremendous insight into this case. I really am trying to clear up the misinformation and really, put out new information, put other information into context. I mean, I don't think the sheriff's department did itself any favors putting so much information close to the vest and not releasing information. I mean, for example, they didn't release the message that was left on the door. She saved him. Can you save her? They didn't want to release that information. They didn't release the notes that Rebecca Zahau wrote and put on her phone, which was were cited in the trial to show that she was very upset and depressed and angry with Jonah and unhappy with the relationship. And so the sheriff's department used that as a basis for determining that she had committed suicide. They said she felt guilty about Max's fault and she was the only adult taking care of him in the house at that time. I just am looking for the truth, and that's what I've presented in the book to the best of my abilities.